I couldn't believe it when she said, "You have to call me your daughter." I refused, and she burst into tears. Later, my son called me, begging me to reconsider. I, 41M, have 2 children with my ex-wife, 42F, my son, John, 22, and my daughter, Sally, 20. I'm now remarried to my wife, 28, and I share a close bond with my kids. John is engaged to Abby, who seems like a nice person, but she has been quite pushy in trying to establish close relationships with me and my wife. She also acts awkward around my wife despite these efforts. Abby isn't close to her own family, and while she shared many reasons for this, some of her complaints don't seem particularly severe to me. That said, it's not my place to judge since I wasn't there to experience it myself. Although we've tried to be welcoming, Abby has pushed her way into certain family traditions that were typically reserved for close family members. She's been calling Sally sis just a few months into dating John and has a strange dynamic with my wife that seems to mix sisterly and mother-in-law-like behavior. However, what I struggle with the most is her desire for me to be a father figure to her, not because we naturally bonded, but because she seems to want it as a given. My kids and I have a tradition where, when they visit, we have a private catch-up in my office before they leave. This tradition has become even more meaningful now, as both John and Sally get along well with my wife but aren't yet comfortable discussing personal matters around her. When Abby asked to join one of these conversations, I explained the tradition to her. Later, John asked me to have a separate one-on-one talk with her, explaining that she had never experienced a caring conversation with her own father. To compromise, I agreed to have coffee with both of them so she could talk, but I did not include her in our family tradition. However, she soon started calling me Dad, even before she and John were engaged. John later pulled me aside and pleaded with me to accept it, saying that I was the father she had always wanted. He even mentioned that she cried watching Sally and me interact. I wasn't entirely comfortable with it, but I felt bad, so I went along with it. Now, she wants me to walk her down the aisle and have a father-daughter dance with her at the wedding. I don't feel comfortable walking her down the aisle, and I walk with a cane, so dancing is difficult for me. Even at my own wedding, I only danced twice. John is now pleading with me to at least do one of the two, preferably walking her down the aisle. When they visited on Sunday, I was talking privately with John when Abby walked in without knocking, excitedly asking if he had told me yet. John then mentioned that she wanted me to say something in my speech about how I now have a second daughter and love her. I just looked at him, taken aback. Abby then asked if I would do the walk and dance for Sally, to which I replied, of course. She then yelled, "I'm your daughter too." I firmly told her that it would never be the same, Sally is my actual daughter. I tried to explain that I was happy to welcome her into the family and that I truly appreciated how happy she makes John, but she burst into tears. They left shortly after, but later, John called me from home, nearly begging me to reconsider. Am I the bad guy for refusing to say I love her like a daughter or that she is one? Update. I had intended to write this update sooner, but life got in the way in some really positive ways. Since people were helpful and asked for updates, and I happened to have a free day, here it goes. On Mother's Day, my kids and their partners visited my ex-wife. It turns out that my ex and Abby are much closer than I had realized, so much so that Abby calls her Mom, which seems to be part of where all of this stems from. Apparently, my ex has been encouraging this dynamic. During their Mother's Day visit, they were discussing the wedding, and Abby repeatedly referred to me as Dad. My son told her to let it go, which led to a heated argument. Abby insisted she deserved to be my daughter, my ex backed her up, and my son tried to get her to be realistic about the situation. Sally, however, bluntly told her, "I only have one daughter." This was in response to Abby telling Sally that, as my daughters, they should be united. According to John, Abby ended up crying. According to Sally, she was crying, yelling, and even kicked something before storming off to her room. Sally also mentioned that she went off on her mom after this, but she refused to elaborate on what was said. Knowing Sally, though, let's just say it was probably intense. Around 2 a.m., I received a text from Sally's partner's phone saying, "Abby really is great. She hasn't been perfect, but you should give her a chance, and you'll learn to love her." I didn't see the message until I woke up, and when I tried to respond, I realized I had been blocked. I later called Sally, but they were driving. Since my place was on the way, she and her partner stopped by later that day, mostly because she prefers my cooking and liquor. While they were there, they told me about everything that had happened the night before. At the end of our conversation, I asked to speak with Sally's partner alone. I wanted to know if I had done something to upset her. She was confused, so I explained that I had been blocked. She assured me I wasn't, but when she checked her phone, she saw that I actually was. I then mentioned the text I had received from her number, and she was completely unaware of it. When I showed it to her, she realized it was no longer on her phone. At that point, we brought Sally into the conversation, and neither of them was happy about what we had just discovered. A couple of days later, John and Abby unexpectedly dropped by, something we don't typically do in this family, but I went with it. I had made salmon, and since it doesn't take long to cook, I quickly prepared 2 more. My wife served the food while I made drinks. The entire night was a cycle of Abby trying to bring up the wedding, John attempting to change the subject, and Abby refusing to let it go. At one point, we discussed logistics since I've been helping them secure good deals through my professional contacts. Then, out of nowhere, Abby said, "So, I was talking to Mom, and she said you can either walk me down the aisle while she does the father-daughter dance, or she can walk me down the aisle while you do the dance. It's your choice, but you need to decide soon." I reiterated that I could not dance. She tried arguing that I had danced a little at my wedding, but I made it clear that is different, and did not feel comfortable walking her. She got upset and said, "Mom loves me, why can't you?" I felt bad but couldn't lie. I pointed out that she had John who loved her, my ex-wife, friends, she had people who love her. She said, "But other than ex-wife, those aren't my parents." I said, "Neither am I." She was very emotional, so my wife and I gave them a few minutes. My son and I were alone later. He looked exhausted. He said the problem was that after Mother's Day Abby had called Sally and kept saying they are both my daughters, that I did not get to be close with one but not both, and that it was them against me, but at that one Sally cried havoc and let slip the dogs of war. Things were said. Grievances were aired. John had to hang up before it got worse, but I guess Abby was shaken. But there was a new problem. Abby had decided in her head that I did not mean what I have been saying and was just doing it for Sally. He told me he would handle it. Ron Howard, he did not. So now I get text messages from Abby every couple of days acting like we have a secret relationship Sally doesn't know about. She even called herself my secret daughter and LOL'd. She invited my wife to lunch saying, 2 out of 3 of his girls, going out. She has even started using the pressure of showing up at events like a recent barbecue to play a certain image. She hugs me more and holds it, wants to do pictures with just me or my wife and I, but always a few with just me to post with captions I do not like. My wife is getting increasingly frustrated with Abby's behavior, especially towards her. Apparently, Abby had planned a surprise Father's Day celebration for me, which had to be shut down, but that didn't stop her from inserting herself into the day anyway. Despite this, my wife has a soft spot for her. She's kind-hearted, and when Abby gets emotional, she tends to give in. I asked John if he was upset with me, and he said no, he just wishes things were different. He assured me we're fine, but he's concerned about his relationship with Sally. That's when I followed some advice and suggested premarital counseling. He said he'd consider it. Meanwhile, Abby is insisting that Sally attend her dress fitting. Honestly, that fitting should be a pay-per-view event because Sally is done holding back. I reassured John that Sally loves him and promised to talk to her, but the entire situation is exhausting. Abby is driving my wife crazy with her ideas about what my girls should be doing, overwhelming me with dad-daughter content, and pushing Sally to the edge. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Abby sent me an email last night listing 3 different father-daughter dance styles and song options. I don't feel any more respected or heard than before. The 6 of us have barely been in the same room together since Father's Day, which was going well, until it turned into a disaster. Apologies for the long rant, but believe it or not, this is the short version of the chaos. We're supposed to meet on Friday, and Sally's fiancé and I have a running bet on just how badly it's going to go. Here's to hoping other fathers had a far less dramatic day than I did. And, just out of curiosity, how serious of a crime does one have to commit to qualify for witness protection? Asking for a friend. Update. I've had quite a few people asking for updates on my situation, and since I'm currently enjoying a refreshing mojito while my wife sips on her nojito, life feels good, so what better time to entertain the world with my personal pain and family drama? Plus, a cousin of mine, who apparently follows along and knows the whole story, hit me with the very convincing argument, "Dude, you can't leave people hanging." And really, how could I argue with such flawless logic? Apologies in advance for the length, a lot has happened. First off, my wife's pregnancy is going well. Keeping her relaxed and pampered has been my top priority. This experience is completely different from the last time, not just because I'm more involved, but because my relationship with my wife is infinitely healthier than what I had with my ex. Sally has been amazing through it all, and even her fiancé has stepped up, helping with the nursery and driving my wife around when I can't. And here's something my wife doesn't know yet, it's a surprise. My son has been secretly building a crib for the baby, modeled after the one I built for him and Sally when they were little. It's his way of showing support, and honestly, it's a beautiful gesture. He's a good man, still in there somewhere, he just has a serious blind spot when it comes to Abby. And that brings us to the part of the movie where Godzilla shows up and starts leveling buildings. I called a family meeting with my kids to address everything. I told John that Sally was only participating in wedding activities she actually wanted to, and the guilt tripping had to stop before it seriously damaged their relationship. Sally was relieved that I said it so she didn't have to, again. I also made it clear that if he didn't put a stop to Abby's constant messages, I would block her and give her an unfiltered explanation as to why. We got a lot out in the open, and John seemed to understand, but a few days later, he and Abby insisted on coming over to talk. Sally and I agreed that this time, we were laying everything out on the table. So we all sat down for dinner at our place, and before we even got settled, Abby immediately launched into baby shower plans. I cut her off and told her that's exactly the kind of thing we needed to discuss. I explained that I understood she was trying to fill a void in her life, that she thought she was gaining a father, a second mother, since, apparently, she calls my ex-wife mom, and a sister. I told her that while a relationship was possible, it could only happen if she actually listened to us. For the sake of family, I offered a fresh start, if she agreed to respect our boundaries moving forward. Sally wasn't thrilled about it, but for the sake of her brother, she was willing to give it a shot. Abby tried to say that since we were starting over we could define what the relationship would be and just be family. We told her we were not ready for that it needs to happen organically. She got mad that I am closer with my daughter's partner, which is true, but we just get along, and that she deserved it for trying so hard. My daughter said something about trying things we actually want. She ran to our bathroom, he ran after her. After a while I checked on him, I could hear her repeating, "This is not what I wanted." My wife, daughter, and her partner went out to the patio to give them privacy and salvage the night. After a bit I got a text saying they had just left. I checked in with him the next day and he said they talked more at home and she understood. For a couple of weeks things were good. The text stopped except the occasional wedding question, since it was getting closer. She stopped pushing herself on my wife and Sally, and we thought was involving us in less in wedding planning out of respect, since as it was they only got the venue at the rate they did because of my professional connections and they know I was willing to help but not interested in helping plan, even if I am good at event planning. But then I got a call from the venue telling me the card I used had been declined. Now this is a specific card I use for big purchases because of the miles, so I knew it had a high limit. That was how I learned that they had changed dates by 2 months despite being informed I would still be out much of the money because it was too close to the date. I was furious. I mean, I have been lucky in life financially, but I am not blow-off deposits like nothing wealthy. Called my son, said he needed to get his ass to the house, just him. They both came. When they arrived, I opened the door, and the first thing out of Abby's mouth was, "Dad." I think I just stared at her for a second before muttering, "You have got to be effing kidding me," and walked straight to the table. Then, as if that wasn't enough, she had the nerve to ask where dinner was. My response was, less than polite, as I made it abundantly clear that dinner was not why we were here. Hoping my son wouldn't lie to me, I asked him directly about what was going on with the wedding venue. Abby immediately launched into wedding details, but thankfully, John cut her off. He explained that they had postponed the wedding because my ex-wife was unavailable due to surgery. He hadn't told me sooner because he was working on covering the financial loss himself, and he had just started notifying guests. And then Abby opened her mouth, "Well, at least now we have extra time to work on our dance." At that moment, my wife came home, and as I was walking her to our bedroom, Abby made that comment. With my pregnant wife right beside me, I calmly responded with something like, "I have very different feelings about that and will elaborate shortly." I helped my wife settle in, got her some water, turned on her favorite symphonic covers of popular songs, and then walked back to the table. That's when I let loose, "You are out of your FN mind. Have you even been listening?" I made it crystal clear that I was done with this nonsense. We all were. I lost my patience and flat out asked if she hadn't understood last time because her head was too far up her ass. She sat there, stunned silent, a truly beautiful sound, just staring at me. I, admittedly with little filter, laid it all out. I told her exactly what Sally and I thought of our time with her and how exhausting it had been, constantly dealing with her attempts to force us to love her without even bothering to know us. She burst into tears, stood up, and shouted, "Then what was this even for?" John, visibly shaken, asked what she meant, if she was referring to them, and he started to panic. Frantically, she insisted she was talking about delaying the wedding. And that's when the bomb dropped. Because, and I'm pouring myself another drink just to get through writing this, it was a ploy. My ex-wife and Abby had come up with this brilliant scheme, convinced that if I had more time, I would come around. And apparently, my ex reassured Abby not to worry about the financial loss because, he's loaded. She has always resented the fact that I make significantly more money now than I did during our marriage, almost as if she thinks I did it out of spite. Honestly, I wouldn't put it past her to have done this on purpose. But it wasn't just me they lied to. They fed the same lie to John. He was devastated. He kept repeating, "You lied to me," while Abby desperately tried to spin it. But he wasn't having it. After all the times he had defended her, covered for her, she had been lying to him, too. Panicked, she tried to shift the blame, pointing fingers at my ex for misleading her and at me for being stubborn. Then she shouted, "Why can't I just FN call him dad?" And finally, after all this time, John snapped. "Because he is not your FN dad." She broke down, sobbing, saying that John had told her she could call me that. And John, now completely done, responded that he had only ever told her she might be able to someday, but he had warned her again and again to slow down. At this point, she was inconsolable, wailing as she tried to sit down, but she missed the chair and landed on the floor. And, well, I appreciate some well-timed physical comedy, so I may have let out a chuckle before hiding my mouth behind my drink. Cue more sobbing. I told them I needed to check on my wife, and as I walked away, I could still hear Abby crying, repeating over and over, "I just want him to be my dad too." When I came out, John was walking Abby to the door. He apologized, but I told him not to worry about it. They left. A few days later, John came over and told me they had a long conversation at home. At one point, he even asked her outright if she would have dated him if there was never a chance of being part of our family. He believed her when she said yes, but she also admitted that I was a big part of the appeal. She told him I was the kind of dad she had always wanted, that my relationship with Sally was something she had always dreamed of, and the way she said it gave John doubts about whether she truly loved him for him. I brought up marriage counseling, how his mother and I had tried it. While it didn't save our marriage, it did give us clarity and an impartial voice in the situation. I pointed out that both of them seemed to come to me for guidance, but I can't be impartial. If they were serious about working things out, they needed to do it the right way. A little later, Abby texted me, asking if I was the one who suggested therapy. I simply replied, "Does it matter if John wants to?" She pushed back, asking why it was such a big deal that she wanted to know what I thought. I told her that John is the man whose opinion should matter most to her. That text led to a fight between them, but in the end, she agreed to counseling. And, the wedding has been postponed. I may or may not have done a little victory dance. So, they're in counseling now. John says she's struggling with it, but I don't know the details. She's been pushing for Sally and me to attend a session with her. Sally shut that down quickly, telling Abby she wouldn't like hearing her unfiltered thoughts, and I have no interest in going either. For now, Abby has been leaving Sally alone. She stopped texting me except for the occasional general question, though there's usually some attempt to dig deeper. My wife still spends time with her occasionally, mostly because Abby is very invested in her pregnancy, more than I'm comfortable with, honestly. But it's my wife's choice. So that's where things stand. Sorry for the long ramble, turns out alcohol isn't the best editor. Update. I was told I should post updates here since people have been asking, especially about what happened on Father's Day and at their mother's house. Life has been extremely busy these past few months, but now that I'm enjoying a temporary break from work, I was reminded of this account, thanks to some recent Thanksgiving drama. So, I'll start with an update and then get into what happened recently. Oh, and to whoever made the joke about Abby finally getting me to dance, I actually laughed and shared it with my family. Lately, most of my time has been spent caring for my wife. I do tend to dote on her, I know. We're having a boy. We're both really excited, though we didn't have a gender preference. I've raised both, and each experience has been wonderful. Now, we're discussing names and who we want to honor. I thought things had been quiet, but I recently found my wife crying and realized I was wrong. Because I'd been so caught up with work, and since she knew I'd be more available this month, my wife had been keeping something from me. Apparently, Abby has been pushing for one big Thanksgiving this year. As far as I knew, things had been quiet with Abby. My son told me that the wedding falling apart had been a wake-up call for her and that therapy was helping. But then this happened. From what I understand, while John has been distancing himself from his mother after everything that went down, Abby did the opposite. According to my wife, one day, Abby dropped by, and she brought my ex-wife with her. My wife cannot stand my ex-wife, mainly because she spread false rumors that our first marriage ended due to infidelity with her, which never happened. In fact, the timeline makes that accusation impossible. And before anyone asks, no, my ex-wife doesn't actually believe there was infidelity. There's more to that story, but I'll leave it there because I'd probably sound biased. Anyway, my wife saw who was at the door through our security cameras, immediately called our daughter, and apparently, the two of them had already been keeping this whole situation from me. Since I was working 18-hour days, they didn't want to add anything else to my plate. I wish they had told me, but I appreciate the thought. Honestly, I'm incredibly lucky to have people who look out for me like that. Whatever my daughter said to her mom on the phone made both of them leave in a hurry. She won't tell me what she said, but she just smiles whenever I ask. I did call John afterward, but he was dealing with some tough work news, so I just focused on being there for him and let everything else go for the time being. The next day, Abby came back, alone this time. My wife saw it was her and asked through the door what she wanted. Abby said she came to apologize. My wife, being the kind-hearted person she is, let her in. They had a nice conversation, and then Abby asked about the whole family getting together for Thanksgiving. My wife assumed she meant us and said, of course. A few days later, we were all in the family group chat, sorting out Thanksgiving plans, who's bringing what, when Abby asked if there was anything else needed. I told her John had already committed to bringing something. Then she asked, what about my ex-wife? What should she bring? Now, in all the time I've known Abby, she has never intentionally made a joke that funny. So I asked her what she was talking about. She brought up my wife's comment about the whole family, and both my daughter and I immediately asked what made her think we counted my ex's family? Her response? She is my family. I don't have a dad who wants me, just a mom, and my mom deserves to be with family on Thanksgiving. Sally responded with, well, we'll miss you and John then. Abby immediately asked how she could say that. Sally shot back, asking how she could be so stupid. John told her not to call Abby stupid, and I agreed, that was fair. But there was no way Abby actually believed my wife meant to include my ex-wife when she said family. By this point, my wife had filled me in. And then, this is so ridiculous. Abby actually used my son's phone to add my ex-wife to the group chat. Next thing we know, my ex-wife is thanking us for the invitation and asking what she should bring. Before I could even finish typing a response, my daughter beat me to it. She asked, less than politely, what my ex-wife thought she was doing and reminded her that she knows she isn't welcome. My wife followed up, saying, you couldn't have possibly thought she was included when I said family. Abby's response? She insisted my ex-wife wasn't coming as my family but as hers. At that point, Sally let her mom have it. She already doesn't talk to her much, but this was the final straw. She made it clear that if my ex-wife was coming, she wouldn't be. I reassured Sally that there was never a chance my ex-wife would actually be there and told Abby and John that I completely understood if they wanted to go to their mom's house instead so she wouldn't be alone. John replied, plans not definite, we'll let you know. Later, he told me privately that he wasn't going to their mom's, but he wanted to tell Abby himself first. What's really stuck in my mind through all of this is Abby's comment about not having a dad who wants her. That tells me she still sees me as a dad, just a negligent one in her eyes. I mentioned it to my son, and he said he noticed it too. Apparently, he even brought it up in therapy, since family is such a recurring topic. Obviously, I don't know the details. Wow, I really thought this would be a quick update, but that turned into a lot. I'll get into the crazier stories later, if people are even seeing this. I don't really know how posting from here works in terms of visibility, but honestly, just getting all this out has been kind of cathartic. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Someone really needs to explain the sunk cost fallacy to John. I honestly can't believe he's still with Abby after all the times she has disrespected him, violated his boundaries, and created issues with your family. Maybe this was covered in an earlier post, but has anyone actually sat him down and reasoned with him that there are other women out there, and that he deserves better than this? Boop. Both his sister and I had a serious talk with him when all of this first started. After the wedding disaster, she and I took him out for a game and had a long conversation afterward. That's when he insisted on counseling. I'm honestly relieved that, for now, the wedding is on hold. He's starting to see Abby more clearly, but in my opinion, he's still too optimistic about her. Commenter 2. OOP, you need to make sure your wife doesn't let Abby into the house when you're not home. Boop. I have told my wife not to let her in if I'm not there. Actually, I told her this before the last incident. But after what happened, she now completely agrees. You're absolutely right, Abby takes advantage of my wife's kindness. That said, once our son is born, I think my wife will be much more protective and firm in setting boundaries. I've already told John that Abby will not be holding our baby, at least for the foreseeable future. Commenter 3. OOP and his daughter need to have a serious conversation with John about Abby. Boop. His sister and I actually did have a serious talk with him not long after everything blew up. That conversation seemed to be what pushed him to demand counseling and pause the wedding. He's been seeing her more realistically since then. His sister pointed out some uncomfortable similarities between Abby and their mother, which, coming from anyone else, would have set him off. And to be fair, I did see that rare temper flash for a second. But once he realized she had actually thought it through and wasn't just saying it to be mean, he listened. Honestly, I never considered the comparison before, but she laid out her reasoning in excruciating detail, and even though it clearly pained her to say it, she was sincere. Something must have clicked, because he has been acting differently toward Abby since that talk. That said, I'm not getting my hopes up just yet. Commenter 4. When two unstable people feed off each other's chaos, they start thinking anything is possible. I have a feeling that even if your son leaves Abby, she won't go quietly. She and your ex-wife honestly sound like two sides of the same coin. Oop. That's exactly what my daughter told him. She really went after him, pointing out all the ways Abby and his mother are alike. And she made her case well. Thankfully, it shook him up. Mini update. I don't have much time to go into detail right now, but I had to share this. I'm so excited. Thanksgiving was such a disaster that my son has officially called off the engagement. He's also going to stay at our place while he figures out his next steps. He showed up Sunday night, completely exhausted, and asked if he could use the guest room. We ended up talking for a couple of hours, and I understand a lot more now about why he felt trapped in that relationship. But the important thing is, he finally realizes that if Abby refuses to acknowledge her issues, he can't fix them for her. This Saturday, I'm taking him and his sister out for a fun day. He looks absolutely drained and just needs a break. Things are still messy, but hopefully, he's moving in a better direction for himself. I also want to say that the support from people here has been incredible, and I really appreciate how much everyone has been rooting for him. And to top it all off, happy holidays to me, because he explicitly told Abby she's not invited. Relevant comments. Commenter 1, I'm so happy you have your son back. But Abby seems so delusional that things might get worse before they get better. OOP, I completely agree, she's not going to let go easily. I doubt this will be a smooth process. Thankfully, we already have multiple outdoor cameras set up, and Abby doesn't have a key. Honestly, it feels like we got my son back, and in exchange, Abby got my ex-wife. I'd take that deal any day. Commenter 2, as a longtime mental health professional, I've seen a lot, and I can't help but imagine Abby having a full-on breakdown when your son officially ends things for good. I'm talking about a full-scale tantrum, kicking, screaming, ugly crying, and accusing him of taking her daddy away and ruining the family she thought they were meant to be. Of course, this isn't a prediction, just the worst-case scenario that popped into my head after years of experience, and, well, Reddit. OOP, my son told me all about their conversation, and it only reinforced that he's making the right choice. It sounds like you were spot on, there was yelling, things were thrown, and she accused him of taking away her chance at a family. There's a lot more that I know, and probably even more that I don't, but well done with your eerily accurate guess. I can only imagine the stories you must have. OOP on how Thanksgiving turned into a disaster. It was bad. Abby actually showed up with my ex-wife, despite there being zero chance that woman was ever stepping foot in my house. Things got ugly fast, and my son really let them both have it. At this point, he's completely done with his mom, both of my kids are. After years of bottling up my frustration over the lies she told about me, I don't have to hold back anymore. It's all out in the open now. Commenter 3, I've been waiting for your update. I hope your family and wife are doing well. I'm sorry your son is going through this, but he made the right choice, and I know he'll find someone amazing. I doubt the drama will settle anytime soon, but I'm looking forward to the next update with all the details. OOP, that's actually why I wanted to post. So many people here have been incredibly supportive, which I never expected, but it means a lot. My son is starting to feel like himself again, and honestly, that's the best holiday gift I could ask for. Of course, healing will take time, but we're here for him every step of the way. Commenter 4, your son is lucky to have such a great dad. You've been so patient and level-headed throughout all of this. It sounds like he has the support he needs to get through it. I hope things get better for all of you. OOP, thank you. There were so many times I wanted to be more forceful about how bad this relationship was for him, but I was worried that since they lived together and she had constant influence over him, pushing too hard would only make him dig in deeper. It's been a tough road, but while he hasn't completely given up on her yet, he now understands that if she doesn't put in real effort to change, he's done. He's already moved a lot of his clothes here, and just last week when she messaged him, he asked if she had followed through on something she promised. When she admitted she hadn't, he was furious. He told me he doesn't trust her, and I asked him if a relationship can even exist without trust. He said no. I think he's finally getting there.